For my final major project, I have looked at global warming and its effects on animals and nature. My aim was to raise awareness to the fact that our planet is slowly being destroyed and that animals are going extinct. I have looked at the causes of global warming and what the animals are suffering from at the moment due to climate change. I wrote a project proposal and explained my concept clearly, and I have also included my research sources and a 17-week plan before starting the project. I began by making mind maps to give me an idea of what I would look at throughout the project. I've also looked at possible influences and research and mediums and techniques. I made mostly series of posters for this project because my pathway for my final major project was graphic design. And finally, I made a mood board about the climate change effects on animals. For my research, first of all, I've looked at global warming and what is global warming. So, global warming is a gradual increase in the overall temperature of the Earth's atmosphere, generally attributed to the greenhouse effect caused by increased levels of carbon dioxide and other pollutants. And then greenhouse effect, what is it? Greenhouse effect is the natural warming of the Earth that results when gases in the atmosphere trap heat from the sun that would otherwise escape into the space. Now, greenhouse effect is actually a good thing as it warms the planet, but the problem is that human activities such as air pollution releases a lot of more greenhouse gases which overheats the Earth and causes global warming. One of the greatest causes of global warming is air pollution. Again, air pollution increases greenhouse effect. So I've talked about how it damages the ozone layer and its effects on animals and habitats. I then took images of a power station that I visited, which was located in Ratcliffe-on-Soar in Nottinghamshire, to show an example for air pollution. Next cause for global warming I've looked at was deforestation. So when trees are cut down and burned or allowed to rot, their stored carbon is released into the air as carbon dioxide, which is around 200 gigatons of carbon. These greenhouse gas emissions contribute to rising temperatures, changes in patterns of weather and water, and an increased frequency of extreme weather events, and so it contributes to global warming. Factory farming. So organic farming can have a positive impact on global warming by reducing carbon through the growth of crops, but factory farming negates the positive impact of organic food and animal production. And factory farming also produces greenhouse gases throughout the supply chain. And it's not just carbon dioxide, but gases including methane and nitrous oxide, also produced in significant quantities, are released through various sources including animal waste and fertilizer use. And both these gases are much more powerful than carbon dioxide. Overuse of electricity increases carbon footprint, which refers to the amount of carbon dioxide and all its other compounds emitted into the air. So the more electricity produced, the more carbon dioxide will be released as well. Use of aerosols. Aerosols are loaded with greenhouse gases, including carbon dioxide and methane, which erode the ozone layer. And here is a chart which shows the aerosol production by region country. And down here I wrote down a list of some of the things people can do to help change these, such as recycling as much as we can, or buying recycled items and not using plastic water bottles, or turning off the lights and unplugging devices when not in use. I finally watched a documentary called Our Planet and analyzed its key points. This documentary shows us how human activities affects our planet and the animals. So analyzing this documentary has helped me learn and know more about the effects of global warming to the animals and nature. And honestly, it was more than I expected. Because these animals live far away from us and we don't see them, we think that these issues don't exist or not as much, but they are actually happening in various regions of the world. From the Arctic to rainforests, to the oceans, and to the grasslands. All of these animals are suffering because their habitats are being destroyed from the effects of global warming. I then looked at water pollution. The toxic substances that enter the water bodies, such as lakes, rivers, or oceans, degrades the quality of water and creates larger oil spills, which causes widespread damage in the marine environment. They smother life and microbial life, which affects the rest of the food chain. Pollution also causes the oceans to become more acidic and generate some toxic and greenhouse gases, which may subsequently contribute to global warming activities. I then went to a canal that was close to where I live. I couldn't believe my eyes. I collected images of the amount of water pollution that was in this area. I cleaned up the canal as much as I could, and I've made a video to be an influence to the audience. I then looked at Olafur Eliasson's Ice Watch piece, where he put large blocks of ice in public spaces across London to melt as a visual reminder of the impact of climate change on the environment. His work inspired me to make a poster of an ice melting. I froze a block of ice in the fridge and took a time-lapse video of it melting on a warm surface, and then made a GIF poster with a text saying our planet is melting. So my aim was to show and remind people that the ice caps of our planet are melting rapidly. Earth is now losing 1.2 trillions of tons of ice each year. I made several trials for this ice poster because I couldn't get the perfect melting of the ice, and I've annotated in each. I then looked at the Worldwide Fund posters, which was about desertification. I've talked about their works, and again I've looked at their other posters, which was about giving a hand to wildlife. And inspired from their works, I made double exposure posters. My intention was to raise awareness towards these animals' habitats being destroyed because of global warming and so human activities. For example, the rhinos, 1/3 of the rivers have drastically decreased in the last 50 years, so we are destroying their habitats. I used texts to inform people of the actual numbers. Most of these animals are suffering because of habitat loss, which is caused by global warming. I annotated on it and reflected on it, and I included process of each of the posters. Again, I first made scamps, and then I included the images used for the Photoshop. I reflected on each of them, how I think they went, what my intentions were. I then made 2 mock-ups of my favorite ones in terms of the message it communicated and the way it looked. I then looked at Andy Goldsworthy's arts and talked about his works annotated on it. And then I've looked at the worldwide found posters again. These posters have influenced me a lot in terms of its composition. So there are two images. On the left we see a shark and on the right we see nothing, which is more horrifying because these animals are about to go extinct due to climate change and human activities, which is a more horrifying thing. And then, inspired by Andy Goldsworthy's works and the Worldwide Fund posters, I created my own poster, land art inspired. So there is a colorful image on the left saying, "Do you like it?" where I used green leaves, fresh looking, bright colors, and on the left I say, "How about this?" And we see a dry ground, dull leaves, dried up leaves. So my intention was to visually demonstrate to people that we are destroying our planet. If we don't stop climate change before it's too late, our planet might end up looking like this as well. Here is the process. Again, I first began by making a stamp of the poster, and then I've used a bunch of leaves. I included a video of me placing the leaves in time-lapse and burning a leaf. For my final piece, I started off by planning, making mind maps of my final piece ideas and then mediums and techniques I could use. Again, I made quick paper cuts to plan out how my posters would look like. For my final piece, I wanted to combine my two most successful posters, which were the double exposure posters and the land art poster I made, which I think were the most successful ones in terms of the messages they communicated. I wanted to use animal figures and make it in a composition like the one I did in the land art poster, where there is a good image on the left and a bad one on the right. Again, I made scamps before actually starting to produce them. These are animals that are endangered and about to go extinct. I drew 5 animals and then decided to do 3 of them. These are my final outcome posters. I made 3 posters because I wanted to show different regions of the world, and of course there are much more animals that are endangered than only these 3. The first poster was the rhino one, where on the right we see a good image, a rhino figure and its habitat looking nice and colorful, and on the bottom I said there are 29,000 rhinos in the wild today, and on the left we can see a bad image of the rhino's habitat, and on the bottom I wrote more than 1,000 rhinos die every year, which means they might go extinct by the end of the century, even earlier. Then for the koala poster, again, there is a good image on the right, green leaves, and then a bad one on the left, a fire. So there are 100,000 koalas in the wild today, but 4,000 koalas die every year, which is a huge amount. And then my favorite one was the polar bear one. So on the right we see ice blocks, and then on the left there are ice melting down. And again I wrote down how many of them exist today and how many of them die every year. I've annotated on my final pieces and explained what my intentions were and what I think about the outcome. I then made mock-ups of each of the posters to see how it would look if I was to present them in public and which locations I would choose. And then I included the process of each of the posters. The koala one, the images were taken by myself. I took a photo of a green tree and I made fire in my back garden to use for the Photoshop. I again explained my intentions and reflected on my work. Again for the polar bear as well, I first made a scamp. For the polar bear, I used images of the internet as I couldn't visit places due to the pandemic. And lastly, for the rhino, for the image on the left, I took it from the internet, and for the image on the right, I made it at home myself. I put some sand in the oven, waited for it to dry, and then used it as a dry land, which I think was successful and it looked realistic. Again, I reflected on my rhino poster as well. Then lastly, I wrote a self-evaluation where I talked about how my journey for my project went, how I think my skills have developed, what I improved at, my strengths and weaknesses. That was it. Thank you for watching my video presentation.